I think just to be respectful of everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to another Medical Town Hall. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kay Wagner. I am a pediatric oncologist and medical director of Camp Bring It On in Sioux Falls, along with being president-elect of COCA. So we are very privileged to have a guest with us tonight, Tracy Gaslin, who is the executive director of the Association of Camp Nursing, and she's going to share some information with us. But before we get going, a couple of housekeeping things. Please make sure you have your video turned on so that we can see you. And if you would rename yourself on the video so we can see your name and the camp you come from, that would be much appreciated. There is a chat down at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to throw out questions. And remember that that will get saved along with the recording of this, so that if a question comes up or a link gets shared, you will still have access to this after the session. And then really just to kind of see where everyone is, what we wanted to do was start with a poll. So I'm going to have Dawn go ahead and launch that. And it's just getting a feel for whether or not you've canceled your camp yet for this year, or if you're not sure. And so we can get some numbers, if you'd please take a minute and answer that. And once we give people a minute to get through that, then what we'll do is let Tracy go through some of the slides that she has. And then after that, we will open it up for questions and discussion. So Don, let us know when you got a representative number of the poll and we'll move on.
Yeah, Kay, out of 12 votes, 10 were they canceled camp, 2 said no. Okay. So that's 12 out of 16 participants. And the other ones left over, you, myself, I think Matt, and Jennifer. So that's a pretty representative sample.
Perfect. For the 2 people who said no, I am curious, is it just that it hasn't happened yet, or you are hoping to have camp? And you can either feel free to answer or throw that in the chat. All right, we will go ahead and turn this over to Tracy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and take it away.
Well, thanks, guys. It's always great to be back with my COCA friends. That poll is very helpful. Thank you, Don, because obviously a good deal of information I was asked to share with you tonight may not be directly applicable to you this summer, but I think all in all, it could be helpful to all of us as we move through the camp season and even into fall and things. So these are, I'm going to show you some guidelines and different information on how we've operated and what some camps are doing this summer. We do realize that a large number of special needs camps have canceled for the summer or are doing something different, like a virtual camping experience. So I just want to kind of walk you through some pieces. I have been very fortunate for the past 2 months to be working on a consortium of individuals who have pulled together guidance for camps. The Association of Camp Nursing, which is where I sit at the group, the American Camp Association, the Center for Disease Control, the Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, and the EHE, which is a consulting group that we worked with to kind of pull all the pieces together. So this consortium group has come together to kind of give guidance and information that allows the CDC then to launch recommendations and guidance for camps. Do I have to tell you, Jennifer, when I want to switch? I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to show you some of the documents. As crazy as it sounds, this was one of the first documents launched by the CDC, and this was released on May the 14th. Now, I will tell you, today is the, 27th? 8th, whatever today is. So we're talking literally 2 weeks ago, the first guidance was basically released by the CDC. This is a one-page decision tree. It is just really helping camps to make a quick decision initially as to whether they think they should operate or not. So it's a kind of a yes-no decision tree that is the kind of a starting point for folks. Next slide. This document was released literally a week ago. So on the 19th, which was last Tuesday night about midnight, so really the 20th is when we got our hands on this information. And this information comes basically from the consortium. Typically, CDC releases guidance for youth and camps, But because of the rollout from the COVID experience from the federal government to the state level, the CDC has labeled this as considerations for youth and summer camps, primarily because they want to make sure people at camp this summer are really listening to their state and local health officials, because they're going to give guidance as well regarding what you should and shouldn't be doing within your particular area or region of your state. So this document has been very helpful in kind of pointing out the key pieces, and I'm just going to, as we go through this pretty quickly, I'm going to just kind of share some of those with you that are contained in this particular document. And I think you'll find this most helpful as you work through things. Sorry about that. Next slide. This is another document that was released by the CDC. It is a 68-page document, which is an effort to align with the CDC activities initiatives. Whoop, back one. That's her. There you go. So this is the comprehensive document around the CDC initiatives as they support the federal rollout from COVID. It is the largest document. It really addresses camps and camp response on page 45 and 46 of this document. But it is a nice piece because it does tie a lot of the pieces together from a more federal and national perspective. Next slide. This is a field guidance document. You can find it on the ACA, American Camp Association, and the ACN website. And this is kind of a true guide, and it's laid out in chapter format. It gives you information about all the considerations for camp within this current pandemic state. It goes through things like all of the mitigating techniques, through cleaning, through disinfecting, through organizing your camp. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this. You can go and read any of this on our website for free. It's there. It's no problem. But I am just going to point out some of the key points that we continue to talk about in all of our webinars around camp with COVID in our life. Next slide. So one of the most important things we're recommending this year is a 3-tiered screening process for camps. We're asking camps to do a pre-screening, a 14-day pre-screening experience where all campers and staff self-monitor, in essence, pre-screen themselves before they arrive at your camp door. That pre-screening period has them ask themselves the symptom questions of cough, fever, fatigue, muscle aches, all the symptoms of COVID. And then also ask them to take their temperature. And also ask them about the other questions, if they've been exposed, if they've been in close contact with someone with coronavirus. And just most importantly, this pre-screening experience is really to raise their awareness and to help them think about these things every day so that when they get to camp, they already have an awareness about what we're going to be doing, what that looks like, and what that initial screening piece is. At most every camp, there's an initial screening where people show up. First day of camp, everybody gets screened. Staff and campers, similar questions, similar process. But again, it's another step to help us make sure that people arrive to camp in a healthy state. The third piece is the ongoing screening. So if you're a residential camp, we're asking you to do some type of regular, and that's not defined, regular ongoing screening. For some people, that's a daily kind of assessment or daily temperature taking or daily asking of symptoms. But some form of ongoing screening is what we're asking people to do, especially in the residential camp experience. Day camps, those kids go home every day, right? So they're doing their initial and ongoing screening are kind of compacted into one event. It's over and over every day that they screen kids and staff when they arrive. Next slide. Here we're talking about some of the risk mitigation techniques, and we've really kind of talked about these in a layering effect. So there's things we're really asking camps to consider how they might do certain things to help mitigate risk at camp. Obviously, hand washing is the most common, and I don't have to tell you guys that. You're the experts in understanding the value of the clean hands and doing a really good job washing hands. So that's one of our layers of protection. The second recommendation are cloth face coverings when folks are within 6 feet of one another. So if you're going to be outside running and playing like these kids are and you can space out, they don't need a cloth face covering on. if they're going to be indoors doing an art project where they're right up against each other, then we encourage cloth face coverings for folks. Most importantly, we know that it basically allows me to help protect you and you to help protect me. But we know that there's times where cloth face coverings are not appropriate in water, not appropriate in kids younger than 2, not appropriate for kids who have difficulty breathing already, and not appropriate for individuals who are unable to remove their own mask on their own accord. So we really talk about making sure that we use those cloth face coverings if possible in an appropriate ways. It doesn't have to be all the time, but we do say that if you know for certain people are going to be in close proximity with one another, that you want to use that as another layer of protection. Cleaning and disinfecting. The nice thing about coronavirus is that it's pretty wimpy, meaning just about any household cleaner or some diluted bleach will kill it. The whole idea about cleaning and disinfecting is if you're cleaning a table, for example, you want to clean the peanut butter and jelly off the table, right? And then you want to disinfect it. So it's a two-step approach. Spraying diluted bleach on top of the peanut butter is not going to work for you. So you need to clean something and then disinfect it. And the disinfectant piece means spraying it on that surface, whatever that might be, and letting it be in contact with that surface. We don't want you typically wiping that back off immediately. We want to sit there and let it dry on the surface. So these are some really important hygiene practices we're asking people to consider how they might do at their camp. Health promotion pieces. We've talked a little bit about the physical distancing on the last slide. Some people call it social distancing. As camp folks, we like to say we want to physically distance and socially engage, right? So that's kind of our mantra at campus. We want kids to socially engage, but just do it at a physically distant place. A part of that physical distancing is what we call cohorting. That means if you have a camp and you're serving a large number of people or whatever size, you want to break those groups into smaller cohorts. So maybe you have bunks that have 10 or 12 kids and a couple counselors, and then you have multiple bunks at your camp. We like for those bunks in this particular season to travel together, to stay together, to do the camp experience together across the camp. And we'll do that with minimal mixing. Now I say that within the context of each area or region of the country is going to be at a different place in their recovery, right? And depending on where you are, phase 1, 2, 3, which is now step 1, 2, 3 of the federal plan, allows you more flexibility within some of that. So just know that with cohorting, we think it's a great way to kind of minimize potential spread. It also allows us to do easier contact tracing. So if this little guy that's in the front of this group in the picture were to become COVID suspect, let's say he comes into health center and he has some cough and he feels fatigued and we're wondering if it could be COVID, then he's only encountered this other small group of people. He has not impacted the larger camp population. And then it's easier for us to do contact tracing with just these few people and with just those few counselors who've been in contact with that individual. One of the most important things we're really encouraging people to do is have a well thought out communicable disease plan. Oncology camps are the best at that. Y'all know all about good infection mitigation factors and risks. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that with you, but there are templates and guidelines for developing what we call the CDP for camps available, and we're willing to help anybody make sure their communicable disease plan is ready and on task for their camp. So that's the key points I wanted to kind of highlight for you. I didn't want to spend your whole time, just give you the kind of the bullet points. We can go into much deeper weeds in detail if people are really interested or have questions. Glad to answer that for you. But if not, here's my phone number, my contact information, and it's available. Jennifer and Don both know how to get a hold of me. So that's easy to do. And so I guess I will stop there and see if there's questions or things I can help anybody with.
Tracy, thank you for that. It was really great to see some of the things we all need to consider and maybe don't want to have to consider. Do you think that this is truly just a give me your thoughts, an opinion kind of question? Do you think this is going to be what's now a normal for camp, or is there a chance that this goes away?
I mean, you know, if we get a vaccine, right, it's going to change the dynamic of things, obviously, just like having a flu vaccine has changed our dynamic as well. So if we get a vaccine, I think it will allow us to have more flexibility and freedom again with that socialization piece, because I really feel like, as you all do, I think that that's really what camp is meant to do. Connect kids to one another and connect kids to nature is kind of that global theme we do around camp, right? So I'm hopeful that either through vaccination or through illness, we develop that herd immunity within the year. I think the challenge with this particular illness, and you've all heard this, is just the kiddos. The challenge and the beauty, I guess I would say. The beauty is that we find that kids are hardly impacted. They're either asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. And so in most cases, you probably wouldn't even recognize or know if a child was COVID positive, because it just in very rare cases have symptoms that even present themselves as ill, if you will. The challenge is counselors, right? So this year in particular, our focus, and we're talking to camps, is really around teaching, educating, and protecting, if you will, that counseling staff, because those are the ones that would get sick and develop symptoms that would be almost recognizable. In most cases, you know, if you have young counselors or young staff, that kind of adds a protective layer as well. But we all work at camps where we have people like me, older people, who probably are a little more at risk just because of age or comorbidities or other health conditions. So we have to think about, not that we're not thinking about the campers, but we really have to think about the people that they encounter and interact with who are the higher risk. So that's a really a concern that we need to think about.
Something else I was going to ask you, when you were making the point about like that little guy in the front of the slide, if he had been COVID positive and had that small group, are there guidelines for isolating him or testing him, and kind of how you decide who of his cohort you need to test?
There are not specific guidelines. So every state tells you to connect with your public health officials, right? So every governor of every state is running their own little show, if you will, which is good in certain ways, but also challenging in certain ways, right? So yeah. We each may be in it. If we were in counties beside each other, your county may be able to do one thing and my county not be able to do that because of previous incidents of COVID in our counties or whatever that might be. So how the governors are laying out their individual plans, making it a little complex, but there's for good reason. You know, you're not going to do a rapid launch of people in New York, right? Or in some of those other areas, but the rural areas can launch and get back to normal operation a little more quickly, we think. It's interesting because I have to share this with you. The challenge is that we say, okay, well, New York has been hard hit, but I would imagine that New York has some of the greatest number of people who are already immune and we think that this condition has some immunity because there's been so many exposures, right? The people in Montana who've had next to no incidents of COVID, nobody out there is immune, right? So then when you start bringing them back together, are they the higher risk group because there's no immunity in that population? Or is it the population who's had a lot of COVID that probably has a lot of people who are on the other side of the illness and probably have some immunity to that? There's been a lot of discussions around this immunity piece of the condition, as well as, is there any aerosolized component to it? So my research piece has been around the aerosolized piece. Are we finding that there's an aerosolized piece to COVID? We don't think so. If there is, it's a very minimal amount, because if we had a very strong aerosolized component, there would be many, many more ill people, right? Take for measles, for example, as a highly aerosolized illness, and you can be sick just by being in a general area of somebody with active measles. So we think that there's always the potential of having some aerosolized piece of COVID, but we don't think that is the primary driver of the condition and where we are now. Come back and ask me something different in 2 weeks, right?
Okay, yeah.
It changes that quick.
Jennifer Whistler, did you have a question? Yes, I'm trying to, sorry, I'm on my phone. Normally I have it on my computer. I can see everything, but I had a question. I know we've had some questions from parents about this, and I was curious. I know that some people are talking about kids coming down who do get COVID with that pediatric, I think it's multi-system inflammatory disease, which is, I guess, COVID related. And specifically, I think they were talking about some kids in New York that had come down with it. But is that something that they're seeing in kids who are asymptomatic as well, or is that something that is known yet?
There's so few cases that we don't have a lot of evidence around that. We do know that none of the kids that have presented thus far have been severe cases, or mild cases. So somebody who's been basically asymptomatic have not, for the most part, been anybody who's presented with this multi-system inflammatory syndrome. So we're still learning about that. But the thing I say too is that is still like, I think the last statistic was 0.002% of the population of COVID, right? So such a minuscule piece of the population, but we understand it is scary for parents. We want to acknowledge that and give them feedback. But at the same time, hopefully put it in a place where we know it's a very small number, but we still have a lot to learn about that. And I'll be anxious to see how that evidence presents itself.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
What other questions do people have, or things that you're wondering about, you want to put out to this group, or Tracy?
Somebody asked if the systemic multi-system inflammatory condition was similar to Kawasaki's. Yes and no. Kawasaki's is a systemic vasculitis. So they do have some similarities from the inflammatory piece, but they do present with some dissimilar features as well. So yes, when people talk about this multi-system condition, they do say it looks sort of like Kawasaki's. So.
Hey Tracy, this is Leah from Louisville, Kentucky. I have a quick question. How do you think COVID is going to, what's the biggest thing that's going to change for the camping world with all this? Not just oncology camps, but just all camps in general. Like, what's the biggest thing that's going to impact everybody, what we're going to have to do?
Did you hear that, Tracy?
I was listening closely. She's in Louisville, so that's what caught my ear. I'm like, I'm in Louisville. You know, it's still to be seen. I mean, obviously, if we get a vaccine, that's going to change things for us significantly. It's going to be great if that occurs and we get some good immunity from a vaccine. That will help to level the playing field a little bit and make it where we're not so anxious about, in good reason to be anxious about this whole asymptomatic component, right? People you can't recognize as ill. And we know that is sometimes not the most contagious, but definitely a contagious phase. When they're asymptomatic, they can be contagious and spread that to others. Typically, once their symptoms have peaked, they're on the downhill slide, they tend to be less contagious, even though they can still spread. So will we get a vaccine? Will that vaccine help us, along with the people who've also had the condition, develop some herd immunity? Herd immunity happens when you have about 50 to 60% of your population have immunity to that condition, right? For some conditions, you need higher than that, depending on what the condition is. So in our case, we have 330 million people in the US. You can do the math. We need half of those people approximately, 150, 160, 170 million people need to have some immunity. So we're still a long way from that. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens this fall and the spring. We're all going to be very hopeful that we have some way of kind of managing this differently, or at least know more in the management capacity.
Okay, we have another question, Jennifer.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, and I'm so sorry if you guys have I'm not sure if this is a series and you guys have already discussed this, but, you know, we're making the decision to cancel camps, and we've been doing so kind of every 2 months, making more decisions. And we still have some camps that are still on schedule for the fall, September, October, November. And is there any kind of recommendation? Obviously, it's kind of a wait and see, I do understand, but I'm sure you guys get this question all the time.
Yes.
And we've gone virtual, I think, like everybody here probably, but I'm just wondering, you know, what are you telling those people?
So we're many camps that don't feel comfortable operating their regular camp, and we totally get that, have decided to do alternative type of camping, virtual being one of those. But some of those have also decided to go to a family camp model, and maybe that's what you're doing in the fall kind of experience. In that the family camp model allows you to do several of those mitigating techniques kind of naturally, right? So when you do a family camp experience, the family is your cohort. They already live together, they're already connected to each other. So when the family comes, they don't have to worry about masking to be around each other, right? They're already been with each other for a long time. So they kind of become their own little cohort. If they can have their own place to sleep or reside, that makes it even better. Then that family can travel to camp, and if they do encounter others, you can use some of those mitigating techniques of obviously hand washing, using a cloth face covering and things. So we're finding that there are several camps who are taking that approach because they feel like with parents there to help manage the children in a certain way, already being you know, exposed, if you will, to each other, you don't have to worry about the families causing exposure to themselves. So those are some things people are doing a little differently and thinking about. They might do family camp experience versus a camp experience for the child without the parents there. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, it's another way of thinking about it. Instead of taking it virtual, kind of change the thought of it, what it would be.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah. So we're doing that this fall. We're going to do a virtual summer camp, and then we're going to do a family camp in October.
Okay.
Oh, here's a question. The question talks about it once a vaccine's available, is how long will it take to actually immunize the population? Well, the president says when the vaccine's approved, there will be 300 million doses available immediately. If that's the case, that's beautiful. I don't know. But I mean, it's a matter of the production, right? So you're not going to produce the vaccine until you know for sure it's efficacious and approved by the FDA. But as soon as that approval happens, then I'm sure they can do some mass production, and it will be lining up like it was in the years ago for MMRs and different things that started many years ago to kind of get people vaccinated in a hurry. So we'll see the new light of vaccine clinics again, I imagine. It's a hard discussion to have, to think about how does this look. I know that for most of us, this discussion is saying now, what does that look like in 2021, right? What does it look like in spring of 2021 when we're trying to recruit staff, or we're trying to do orientation, or we're trying to order supplies? There is no perfect answer. You're exactly right. And just kind of trying to wait and see. But I will tell you, we have very different information right now than we did as of May the 13th. So May the 13th, we were kind of like, we need guidance. Let's get the guidance out. Please, CDC, release guidance. We sent you the information. Now just get it back out to the public. And so in the past 2 weeks, from May the 14th till just now even, there's been a lot of information come out. So if you don't have, anything else in your world to do, I would encourage you to start looking through those documents, and Jennifer has this PowerPoint slide. She's more than welcome to share it with whoever, but start going through those documents, thinking about how you might apply some of that at your camp next summer in the event you want to do that, right? As time goes along, we are going to have more and more people have some immunity. We're going to have more and more people who are learning about how we manage differently, how we operate differently. I'm still doing telehealth, for example. I'm going to start seeing patients again in person next month for a little bit. But for the most part, some of this remoteness may stay with us a little while until we have a better sense of where we are with the vaccine and other treatment potentials. Jennifer, do you have a location you can like post those documents somewhere for people on your all's website or?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was just, I've got them in a Google link. We put them in a Google Doc, and I'm trying to access it right now.
No worries. I was just going to say I can send you the links for any of these if you needed me to, so that folks had them and could hold on to them. But you can always come to our website too. And well, they're always there, and we keep all of that information updated. The field guide changes as we get more information. So it's what we call a living document. So it's not set in stone. So as we get more information from the EPA or the World Health Organization just released their recommendations and some information, we'll start looking at those and start incorporating those into the field guide as well. As we learn more about PPE and different things, we'll start releasing that information. So everything starts pretty tight and secure, and as we learn, we kind of begin to relax some of those boundaries and hope that we can get more back to what we think of as normal. Makes us appreciate where we were, right, in February. Is there any other camp topics people have questions about? Because I can talk about COVID, but I can talk about other things too related to camp. So that's what I do is camp.
I have a quick question. I'm so sorry, y'all. Sunshine Kids is a little different in that many of our camps are trips. And in particular, one thing that we do is our teen program. We host 1-week trips for teenagers from hospitals all across the U.S. and Canada throughout the year. We'll have about 30 teens at a time for 1 week, and they fly in from different areas in a special city like New York City, which and obviously know that one's not going on, but New York City or Los Angeles and places like that. So, I almost feel like, I don't feel like parents would be even comfortable letting their kids get on a plane in 2021 either. So I'm just wondering if it's something we need to do to kind of change what our main focus is, or at least temporarily.
The first challenge for that type of programmatic setup will be what travel will be allowed, right? What are your public health officials allowing? Now, we know that they're already kind of relaxing some of the interstate travel, so you can travel between states now in certain cases, like they were just relaxed our interstate travel. But in other places, they may still be holding that pretty tight or really checking some of that. So I always said the first step when you start thinking about camp and the potential of doing camp is connect with your local health officials, whoever that might be. That might be your local health department. That might be, if you don't know, contact your governor's office and find out who regulates and controls your public health services of your state. Sometimes it's in the public health realm. Sometimes it's in parks and recreation. Sometimes it's in child care. So every state has different organizations that oversee camp operations. I know in Colorado, all the camp operations follow under the child care regulations. So like for daycares and those type of things. In other states, it falls under parks and recreation. So everybody has a different oversight group, but you want to make sure you are connected with whoever's making decisions about what healthcare is going to look like and what you can do from a healthcare perspective within your particular area. So in your particular area, again, even when you're butted right up against two counties, one county may be able to do something and another county maybe not, depending on how that's laid out, how they're looking at any potential resurgence of the virus, because we know the numbers are going to have to go up a little as people begin to get out, as companies begin to get back to work, as people start getting back in their office buildings. Those numbers are going to go up a little bit, but the whole intent is that we don't go up enough that it overwhelms the healthcare system, right? We want to just be able, we need to keep it at a manageable level. So in saying that, traveling between state and state and being able to manage all those moving pieces may be a little challenging. You may want to think, can you do it where you just go to one spot?
Yeah, that's what
I was. Where you're just going to one location?
Yeah. No, you probably have to change it up a little bit.
Right.
Especially the places we go, you know, New Orleans, Chicago, New York, stuff like that. So.
Yeah. And even those mayors of those big cities may have some really strong influence on the governor and what their decisions are as well, right? So it is definitely a wait and see game, but I'm telling you, things can happen quickly. And if the numbers look good and things seem to be going well and we're maintaining at least or coming down, people will continue to allow that opening up of different parts of the community and of industry and of operations and companies. So we'll just have to kind of see how those things work. The next question was, let me go back.
And I think Linda from Tip of the Toes has a question for you.
Okay.
I'm from Tip of the Toes in Canada, and we're sort of like the same thing like Jennifer just described. We take kids from, sorry, I'll just put my video. We take kids from all over Canada. So, and we go on expeditions like in the far north or in wilderness. So it's even harder to organize. And so we've had to cancel our 2 expeditions from this summer because of the traveling, especially. We have kids coming from Vancouver and some from out of East and some from Montreal. So it's been quite a challenge. We've been trying to figure out how to keep up the expeditions, but we've had to cancel for this summer. So, but we're going, like, we might have to think of more regional ways to organize the next expeditions in fall, for instance.
You said you are going out into the wilderness, which is a nice piece, and that if you have a cohort of people that you're bringing, the expedition itself, from what you're just saying in this very short piece, doesn't sound concerning. It's where the people are coming from that's your challenge, right?
Yeah,
So
right,
they're coming
exactly.
from all sorts of areas. If they were coming from one local region or area, you could possibly do your pre-screening and then do some initial screening and have a sense of what your COVID levels look like in that particular area, right? Because
Right.
even now in the US, they're saying for residential camps that you need to recruit from your local geographic region. It's not defined, but your local geographic region, whether that's your state or your county or multiple counties, but we are looking at to say we want people to recruit, if you will, from an area which will hopefully be at the similar level of operations. So in essence, we don't want somebody to recruit a camper from somebody who's still in a phase 2 with very limited interactions to somebody who might be in a phase 3 in the US, which is more open and the more relaxed. So we're always thinking about how do we recruit kids from a very similar type of situation and level of operation across the board that when you bring them together.
Right.
And that can be hard because there's no way for you to know where everybody is in that phase of reopening, right? You
Exactly.
can't track everybody.
Right.
In the US, we have a county by county tracking system. So it's a website where people can go in, they can look and they can click on a county in any state and it will tell them what's going on with that particular county, which is very nice. So as if people are trying to do recruiting in a local geographic region, they can look at those counties around them and those local areas to see what's going on there as well. And that's been helpful to camps.
Right.
I know we have a lot of US kids that go to Canada for camp. I have a friend who does art camp in Toronto. So yes, it's the recruiting piece for some camps that's a challenge, and for others it's the activity, what the activity creates as far as exposure or potential exposure and close proximity. So everybody has a little different piece that's difficult for them.
Any other questions people have? We want to make sure we're respectful of time here, so. Well, remember, if you do have other questions that come up, don't hesitate to reach out to the COCA team, or as Tracy said, her contact information is on there. So please go ahead and use those resources. And if there's other questions that come up or things people want to discuss or stuff you can't remember, hopefully it's either on the recording or in the chat room for this. So one last call for questions. Otherwise, we'll let people get a little bit of time back maybe. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. And Tracy, thank you so much for sharing your time and information with us. Thank you.
No problem. You'll have a great day.
You too.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome. Take care, guys. Okay, bye-bye.